before the world called him the legend, before Hollywood turned his life into a blockbuster, Chris Kyle was just a kid from Texas who believed in protecting people he would never meet. But the real story, the sacrifices, the chaos, the impossible decisions, is far bigger than the myth. Today we uncover the full, unfiltered life of America's most famous Navy SEAL sniper, a man shaped by war, loyalty, and the burden of being extraordinary. Chris Kyle was born in Odessa, Texas on April 8, 1974. He wasn't born into power, privilege, or military expectations. He grew up on open fields, dusty roads, and long hunting trips with his father. Chris learned to shoot before he learned to ride a bike. Not because he wanted to be a soldier, but because in Texas, respect for firearms is a way of life. His father taught him one rule that Chris kept forever: protect those who cannot protect themselves. Kyle was a rough, competitive, stubborn kid, the kind who got knocked down and stood back up without wiping the dirt off. He loved rodeos, horses, long days outside, and everything that tested his limits. No one knew it then, but the foundation of a SEAL sniper was quietly forming. Before the Navy, Chris had one dream: become a professional rodeo rider. He traveled, competed, and pushed his body to the limit. But one brutal fall shattered his wrist so badly that doctors told him the dream was over. For most people, that would be the end. For Chris, it was the beginning. The injury forced him to rethink everything and guided him toward the strangers he would one day protect on the battlefield. When he visited a military recruiter, he didn't ask about jobs or benefits. He asked only one question: where do the toughest guys go? The recruiter pointed to the Navy SEALs. Chris nodded. Sign me up. But the Navy didn't take him immediately. His injury showed up in medical screening. Rejected. He went home, frustrated but stubborn. Months later, the Navy called again. You've been cleared. Do you still want it? Chris didn't hesitate. He stepped into the SEAL pipeline with zero expectations, except one: never quit. Basic underwater demolition SEAL. Training Bud-S destroys almost everyone who enters. Cold water, sleepless nights, brutal conditioning, humiliation. Chris survived it because he had a strange advantage. He loved the suffering. Pain told him he was alive. Pain told him he was getting stronger. Pain became fuel. Instructors noticed he didn't complain, didn't slow down, and didn't break under pressure. He graduated and earned the Trident, the symbol of a U.S. Navy SEAL. For Chris, it felt like rebirth. In the SEAL teams, Chris discovered his true talent: precision shooting. He didn't love killing. He loved protecting. Sniping wasn't about taking life. It was about saving lives. A single shot could stop an ambush, prevent a suicide bomber, or protect a squad of Marines pinned down in a street. Chris trained relentlessly. Wind speed, air density, distance, heartbeat control, breath timing. He studied everything. Within the teams, he gained a quiet reputation. If Kyle is on Overwatch, you're safe. After 9/11, everything changed. Chris Kyle was deployed to Iraq as part of SEAL Team 3. He wasn't a legend yet, just a dedicated sniper doing his job. But the environment was unlike anything he had imagined. Cities turned into battlefields. Civilians mixed with insurgents, chaos in every direction. His role: protect Marines, protect civilians, protect his teammates. During those early missions, Chris took difficult shots that saved entire patrols from ambush. Slowly, carefully, decisively, his name began to circulate among units on the ground. There's a SEAL watching over us. Kyle's reputation grew not because of numbers, but because of impact. He saved Marines from snipers. He stopped suicide bombers. He eliminated threats that would have killed dozens. Soon, troops started calling him the legend. It wasn't a title he wanted. To him, it felt heavy, like a label he could never truly earn. But to the soldiers who survived because of him, it was simple. Chris Kyle was the difference between life and death. His longest confirmed shot, 2,100 yards, wasn't about skill alone. It was about instinct, timing, and absolute courage. Chris Kyle was unstoppable in combat, but every deployment left scars that no medal could cover. He saw friends fall. He saw civilians terrified. He saw a war that demanded more than any man should give. Yet he kept returning, again and again, because Marines on the ground needed him. Back home, he struggled. Noise felt too loud. Crowds felt unsafe. Fast movements triggered memories, but he hid the pain from everyone, including himself. After 4 intense deployments, Chris made the hardest decision of his life. He left the teams. His wife, Taya, and his children needed him. He knew that if he kept deploying, he might never come home alive, physically or mentally. The battlefield had shaped him, but it wasn't the place he belonged forever. Transition wasn't easy. War doesn't leave quietly. It echoes. Chris wrote American Sniper not to brag, but to explain what war does to a person. The good, the bad, the heroism, and the darkness. The book exploded in popularity. People finally understood the burden behind the legend. Hollywood adapted it. Bradley Cooper played him. Yet Chris himself remained humble. He never saw himself as special, just a man who did his job. Instead of giving up, Chris turned his pain into purpose. He began helping veterans struggling with PTSD. He spent hours at gun ranges, training former soldiers, giving them confidence, and rebuilding their spirit. He believed deeply that no warrior should fight their battles alone. On February 2, 2013, Chris Kyle and his friend Chad Littlefield took Routh to a gun range in Texas. Chris hoped a day of support and brotherhood might help the young Marine. But something felt wrong. Ruth was silent, distant, and unstable. Still, Chris trusted the mission. He had helped so many before, why not one more? What happened next was quick, tragic, and devastating. In a moment of paranoia, Eddie Routh turned the gun on the two men who were trying to help him. Chris Kyle, the legendary SEAL, the man who survived 4 combat tours, was killed not in battle but at home while trying to save someone else. When the news broke, America stood still. Warrior known for saving countless lives had his own taken in an unthinkable way. Tributes poured in from every corner of the country. Soldiers, veterans, politicians, even people who had never met him but felt connected to his story. Chris Kyle wasn't just a name anymore. He became a symbol of sacrifice, of brotherhood, of the unseen wounds of war. In 2014, Clint Eastwood released American Sniper, a film based on Kyle's autobiography. The movie shattered box office records and introduced millions to the man behind the rifle. But beyond Hollywood, beyond the fame, Chris Kyle's real legacy was in the lives he touched, the veterans he helped, the families he supported, and the warriors he inspired. People remember Chris as the deadliest sniper in U.S. history, but he never wanted that title. What mattered to him were the brothers beside him, the SEALs he fought for, the Marines he protected, the soldiers he stood with. To Chris, the battlefield wasn't about numbers or records. It was about responsibility. Protecting others was not just his job, it was his identity. Those who served beside Chris Kyle share stories most people never hear. They talk about the missions where he volunteered to take the most dangerous positions, the times he crawled across open ground to protect Marines who were pinned down, and the nights he stayed awake after long battles, cleaning weapons and preparing for the next day, because he refused to let anyone else carry the burden alone. To his brothers, Chris wasn't a legend. He was a shield. Chris Kyle often said he wasn't fearless, and he just learned to act despite the fear. He feared losing teammates more than he feared death. He feared what enemy fighters might do to civilians if he didn't stop them. He feared returning home and not being the husband and father his family deserved. But he faced every one of those fears head-on. That's what made him extraordinary. At home, Chris was completely different from his battlefield image. He was playful with his kids, gentle with his wife, and humble in his daily life. He cooked, he joked, he fixed things around the house, and he tried hard to rebuild the parts of himself that war had taken. Taya describes him as a man who loved fiercely and who carried invisible wounds that he tried to hide behind a strong smile. Even after writing his book and finding success, Chris wrestled with the same problems many veterans face. The sudden silence of civilian life, the guilt of surviving when others didn't, the moments of emotional numbness, and the feeling that the world around him no longer spoke the same language. He didn't ask for pity. He asked for purpose, himself to helping others climb out of the darkness he understood too well. Chris Kyle loved America, but more than that, he loved the people who defended it. He believed every soldier, every Marine, every airman and sailor deserved dignity, support, and a chance at healing. When he met veterans, he didn't see ranks or medals. He saw men and women who gave pieces of themselves to the country. Chris Kyle's story reached far beyond the United States. Soldiers from allied nations studied his tactics. Military trainers referenced his work in marksmanship programs. And people from ordinary backgrounds drew inspiration from his perseverance. He showed the world that even the strongest warriors carry weight, and that courage is not the absence of struggle, but the determination to rise every time life hits hard. Chris Kyle teaches us that greatness is not just about skill, it's about responsibility. It's about standing up when others sit down. It's about protecting the weak, guiding the lost, and placing the team above the self. His life reminds us that anyone can be strong, but only a few choose to be protectors. To the next generation of warriors, his story is a call to action. Be disciplined, be selfless, be loyal, and carry honor in everything you do. Chris Kyle showed that the world doesn't need perfect heroes. It needs real ones. Those who rise through pain, stand through fear, and fight for something greater than themselves. Chris Kyle's life wasn't just a chapter in American military history. It was a testament to duty, service, sacrifice, and heart. He lived with intensity, loved with loyalty, and left behind a legacy that will outlive every battlefield. This was the extended, unfiltered truth of a man whose legend continues to inspire millions. Chris Kyle, a warrior forever.